How often do you visit a library? Why do you visit a library? I'm sure you realize to find the unfolded treasures, the untold stories and sagas that are piled up in the crowd of the books. It not only vibrates, it resounds, it echoes the banging ideas in your head. George Louis Borges compared the book library with the paradise. I think it's a two-way door, both inside your inner self, where it plants a seed for thought and growth, and the other door opens to the outer world, where it marks the strong rooting of ever-nurtured tree of curiosity and exploration. In words of armor, you lower down your pitch and raise your heads high. With this glory of library, let me state today's head of discussion. Well, for your utter delight, I'm gonna try to pen down the receptor conference, which we are lingering on and sticking on from a very long time. Welcome all to Is Pharmacology Difficult podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Radhika Vijay, MBBS MD Pharmacology, and this is the audio hub to get the best, simplified basic tips, strategies, methods, and lots of ideas to learn better, understand better, and make your concepts crystal clear. If you rarely find, and if there's a question hovering in your minds, is pharmacology difficult? Lend me your ears for a while and let in the magic of knowledge. To begin with, let's get to know how the receptors they are regulated. Now just understand this thing, that receptors they are not static, they are dynamic. Their activity level and the signal feedback, along with a good gracious variety of physiopathological influences, all in all, monitor the influence and the depth they exert on a particular response. Now I will throw light on some well-known and commonly used terms like up and down regulation of receptors, their supersensitivity, their desensitization, etc. Once the receptor is deprived of an agonist for a very long time, then you need to know the different routes of this deprivation. Either there's a long continued use of an antagonist, or sometimes mishaps like denervation they are responsible. Then what happens? The receptor suddenly attains a hypersensitive state towards the agonist, and the right term at this particular moment to use for this whole situation is the supersensitivity. Yes, that sounds quite perfect and right and apt. A classical example which I just cannot resist to quote in this moment is when you suddenly discontinue propranolol in case of angina. A supersensitization of receptor occurs, and same happens when the withdrawal reactions are observed in drugs like opioids, CNS depressants, etc. Well, what do you say? What explanation you gonna offer for this situation? What are you thinking? Don't strain enough, I'm gonna explain it very nicely. Are the receptors unmasked? Are they proliferated? Or does enhancement of signals by the various effector or transducers is the key to the cause of this dilemma? That sounds really interesting, right? Well, I have a perfect term to introduce at this moment. Let's strike when the iron is hot. And the term is upregulation of the receptors. Yes, this is the sensible explanation for this whole situation that is occurring and the state of receptors that is being discussed. Now let's have a look at the other side of the coin. Just imagine there is an excessive or prolonged receptor stimulation. Then, in fact, after attaining the highest possible response initially, the response gradually diminishes, it fades away, and still the agonist is present at that particular spot. Simply, you can call it receptor desensitization and comprehend it as a sort of receptor defense system from excessive, intolerable stimulation. Now, some good to know examples in this particular context is when the high doses of drugs like levodopa they are administered to the patients suffering from Parkinsonism. Then possible explanations sought after can be two types. Yes, number one, receptor becomes inaccessible to the agonist. They are masked, they are internalized, or uncoupling to the effector system occurs. Now this whole action, this whole response, this whole mechanism is very quickly occurring. It doesn't take a lot of time. And you should remember that desensitization is the reversible phenomena. Now, second possible explanation can be that there is a lot of receptor damage, a lot of receptor destruction, or rather a decreased production. All in all, a good perfect term to define all these happenings together is the receptor downregulation. Now, this is a much awaited term. Yes, it is. Let's quickly summarize both the upregulation and the downregulation of the receptors. Receptors, they reduce in number with continual or prolonged exposures to the agonist, and possible causes are endocytosis in receptors or internalization of the receptors. That is receptor downregulation. Next, receptor number and their sensitivity goes up with continual or prolonged deprival of the agonist, and the possible explanations, the possible mechanisms, they can be moving out or externalization of the receptors, and they are termed as the upregulation of the receptors. Downregulation results in slow, impeded responses. Good example is in the case of asthmatics when they are given beta-2 agonist for a long continued time. Beta-2 agonists can be salbutamol, they can be terbutaline, etc. And converse is true for upregulation. Now, this crossword puzzle of the receptors going up, going down, showing more, showing less responses, all in all is fully solved for the day. And though I tried much hard to complete up this receptor story, I'm gonna end this crossword for the day. I'll be soon back with a new acrostic, something to bend your minds effectively, to sharpen, to open your minds, other way apart from visiting a library. You know, the only thing absolutely you have to know is the location of the library as coded by Albert Einstein. And yes, don't forget to keep the silence. For all the updates and latest episodes of my podcast, please visit www.ispharmacologydifficult.com, where you can also sign up for a free monthly e-newsletter of mine. It actually contains a lot of updates about medical sciences, drug information updates, and my podcast updates also. You can follow me on different social media handles like Twitter, Insta, Facebook, and LinkedIn. They all are with the same name as Pharmacology Difficult. If you are listening for the first time, do subscribe and follow whatever platform you are consuming this episode. Stay tuned. Do rate and review on iTunes, Apple Podcast. Stay safe, stay happy, stay enlightened. Thank you!